Have you ever felt that kind of petty little feeling, maybe even a smallness inside of you that rises up when somebody else is getting the spotlight? I remember when I was a young pastor on staff at a large church, and I was eager to have an opportunity to speak. And when one of those occasions came up, the speaking opportunity actually was given to a friend of mine on staff. And I remember wanting them to do well, but at the same time wondering, why not me? Where does that come from? Well, there's something inside of you and then something inside of me, this little ego monster that wants to get fed. And it gets fed by hogging the spotlight and controlling the platform. Here's the thing, you know your ego monster is a little out of control if you're too overly defensive, or you're trying to control, or you think you're always right, or you can't share the credit with others. You see, your ego is fragile and your ego is addicting. It's addicting because it tells you how amazing you are. It tells you the things you want to hear about yourself. You're special, you're talented, all of those things. In his book, The Ego is Enemy, Ryan Holiday says there's two aspirations in life that every human has. One is to either be a somebody or to do something. And he would say in westernized culture, more so now, we all want to be somebody. And that means that we need recognition. And because we need recognition from others, we're going to hog the spotlight and the platform, and we're going to feed the ego and the pride. He says the better way to go is actually to do something, because people who want to do something are more focused on being useful than they are about appearing to be useful. In fact, the ego is what blocks us from growing or learning or improving, because it requires humility to learn. Now, you might be wanting to push back and say, hey, Jonathan, but wait, I am in a tough workplace. You don't understand. It's dog eat dog. You need an ego to get ahead. And I would push back at you and say, I think you need confidence. And there's a difference between confidence and ego. The ego thrives on pride. The confidence flows or stems from competence. As you do things, as you work at things, as you master them and repeat them, confidence begins to grow in you. The ego actually prevents you from growing because it requires humility to learn. I like what the Stoic philosopher said. He said this, it's impossible to learn that which one thinks one already knows. How are you going to learn? Now, the Apostle Paul wrote centuries ago, and he gives us really two keys that helped him keep his ego in check. One is he did shout-outs, and secondly, he honored God for the gifts that God gives. Let me show you what I mean. He wrote these series of letters to the churches back then, and at the end of every letter, he spends a significant amount of space giving shout-outs to people. He recognizes them by name. And what's interesting is he recognizes an aspect or a characteristic that sometimes doesn't always get applauded in our culture, but we all love, and we know it's actually essential to building a good life. He honors things like faithfulness and kindness and courage and service and generosity. These essential and important things. Now, Paul also shouts out God and what God contributes to our life. He wrote a letter to a church, and he says this in it. He said, take a good look, friends, at who you were when you got called into this life. Isn't it obvious that God deliberately chose men and women the culture overlooks and exploits and abuses? He chose nobodies to expose the hollow pretenses of somebodies. That makes it quite clear that none of you can get by blowing your own horn before God. Everything that we have, right thinking, right living, and a fresh start and a clean slate comes from God by way of Jesus Christ. That's why we have the saying, if you're going to blow a horn, blow a trumpet for God. What Paul's saying is, listen, even if you're madly successful and you're watching this video right now, he would want you to pause and say, hey, but who fills your lungs with breath? Who gave you the energies and the abilities to focus at work and to be so resilient in this life? Like, who gave you the brain or the opportunities that you have to develop into the person you've become? So Paul is pushing for us to shout out others, put the spotlight on others, and he's pushing us to recognize that maybe God has a role in some of the things that you're seeing in your life that is good. So here's my challenge to you as we leave this video. One is, who in your supporting cast of characters in life do you need to shout out? At the end of this video, maybe you need to text them or email them or send off a note or maybe even call them and just say, thank you. Thank you for the way you encourage. Thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for your service. Make it specific and connect it to a value or characteristic. And then secondly, you might want to look up and say, God, thank you. Thank you for what you've put in my life. Help me to use it well in this life. The challenge is to choose shout-outs over egos.